Marcus Vale walked into the Valeria Grand at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and the first thing he did was smile. Not at the chandelier, not at the marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent. He smiled at Amara Bennett, standing behind the front desk in her pressed uniform, name tag crooked the way it always was. Like a man who had just found something he misplaced and expected it to be exactly where he left it. She saw him before he reached the desk. She knew the walk. The unhurried pace of a man who had never once in his life believed a door was truly closed to him. Her hands went flat against the counter, steady. She had practiced steady. "You really thought you could disappear from me?" If you've ever had someone look at you like you belong to them, like your choices, your silence, your whole rebuilt life is just an inconvenience, they're willing to wait out. Drop a comment below and tell me what city or country you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. And if it's your first time here, subscribe and hit that like button so you never miss what comes next. Because what happened in that hotel lobby in the next 60 seconds changed everything. Amara Bennett had not always been a woman who flinched at elevator sounds. There was a version of her, not so long ago, maybe 3 years back, who laughed loud enough that strangers in restaurants turned around, who had opinions about bad movies and shared them without apology, who left voicemails that ran 4 minutes long because she always had more to say. Marcus had not taken that woman in one dramatic moment. He had taken her in pieces. First, it was the small corrections. Her laugh was too much. Her opinions were exhausting. Her phone calls to friends ran too long, and didn't she realize how that looked, how it sounded, like she needed attention all the time? He said these things gently, in the beginning, with a hand on her arm and a tone that suggested he was doing her a favor. By the time Amara understood what was happening to her, she had already started editing herself before she even opened her mouth. She left Marcus on a Wednesday in January, 18 months ago. She did not do it dramatically. She did not throw things or issue ultimatums. She simply waited until he was at work, packed 2 bags, and walked out of the apartment with her hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys twice in the hallway. She had not gone back. What she had done, piece by painstaking piece, was rebuild. A new apartment in a neighborhood Marcus did not know. A new phone number. A job application on a whim. The Valeria Grand was hiring night concierge staff, and night shifts meant fewer people, fewer questions, fewer moments where someone might ask her why she looked tired. The Valeria Grand was the kind of hotel that made ordinary people feel like tourists in their own city. 47 floors of glass and imported stone. A lobby that hummed with soft piano music from a live pianist who played the same Coltrane piece every Tuesday. Guests who arrived in cars with tinted windows and left no visible footprint. Amara learned the rhythms of the place within 2 weeks. Which guests preferred silence? Which ones wanted conversation at the desk, just enough to feel acknowledged? Which staff members came in early and which ones ran 5 minutes late and covered it with confidence? She learned to anticipate what people needed before they asked, because that was the job, and she was good at her job. What she had not anticipated was Kang Jun-hae. He arrived on a Thursday, 3 months into her employment, with no announcement and no ceremony. 4 men walked in first, scanning the lobby with the practiced efficiency of people whose entire professional existence was devoted to making sure nothing caught their employer off guard. Then he came through the revolving doors, and the lobby, already quiet, somehow became more so. Amara noticed because the pianist stopped mid-phrase. Not a full stop, just a half-beat hesitation, like the musician's hands forgot what they were doing for a single second. She noticed because the night manager, a composed Korean-American man named David Shin, who never visibly reacted to anything, straightened at his desk in a way that looked almost involuntary. She had seen wealthy guests before. She had seen powerful ones, the kind who wore their money like a second skin and expected the world to rearrange itself around them. Kang Jun-hae was not like that. He was not performing. He walked across the marble floor with the quiet certainty of a man who had stopped needing to prove himself a very long time ago and had since found the whole business of impression faintly boring. He did not look at the pianist. He did not look at the desk. He looked straight ahead at the elevator bank, and his eyes passed across Amara for exactly 1 second before moving on. She felt that second for much longer than 1 second. David handled the check-in personally, which was unusual. The top 2 floors had been reserved, not rented, reserved. and the guests on those floors received a separate service protocol that Amara was handed in a sealed envelope her second week, with a note that said she should read it once and then put it somewhere she would not lose it. The protocol was 7 bullet points long and could be summarized as: do not disturb, do not inquire, do not make eye contact unless eye contact is initiated first. She had read it twice. She was not above curiosity. Over the following weeks, Kang Jun-hae became a presence in the hotel, the way a piece of furniture becomes a presence. Not intrusive, just definitively there. His men rotated in shifts. Food was brought up from a restaurant 2 blocks away in sealed containers, never from the hotel kitchen. Guests who rode the elevator with him, which happened rarely because his men generally managed to hold the car, said nothing to anyone afterward. Not out of intimidation, Amara thought, more like they sensed correctly that there was nothing to report. She did not know what he did. She knew what people said. The whispered shorthand that circulated among the staff in the break room, swapped over bad coffee and lowered voices. Organized crime. Korean underworld. A man whose name meant something in certain circles that had nothing to do with board meetings or charity galas. She did not ask questions. She had been taught, by Marcus, by the careful self-erasure of the last 3 years, that questions had costs. She kept her head down. She did her job. She made sure her section of the lobby was exactly as it should be at exactly the right moment. She did not think about him much. That is what she told herself. That is almost true. The night Marcus walked through the revolving doors, it was 43 minutes into Amara's shift. She recognized him across the lobby with a clarity that was physical, a sudden tightening in her chest, a drop in body temperature that had nothing to do with the hotel's air conditioning. Her brain did the thing it had learned to do, running a rapid assessment: exits, distances, witnesses. David was at his desk 12 feet to her left. The lobby was not empty. The pianist was still playing. She was not alone. She told herself that. She kept telling herself that while Marcus crossed the marble floor with his hands in his jacket pockets, and that unhurried walk that she had spent 18 months trying to forget. He was 31 years old, medium height, the kind of handsome that photographs well. He had a face that looked open and trustworthy in poor lighting, which was why people always believed him before they believed her. She had watched it happen 3 times, once with her sister, once with a mutual friend, once with her own mother, and each time it had felt like swallowing something cold. Amara. He said her name like a greeting, like they had made plans and she was the one who was late. This is my workplace. She was surprised by her own voice. It came out level. You need to leave. I just want to talk. He placed his hands on the counter, open-palmed, the gesture he used when he wanted to seem reasonable. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I'm working. You're standing behind a desk. He smiled. Come on. The thing about Marcus was that he never looked like the threat he was. He looked like a concerned ex-boyfriend who couldn't quite let go. He looked like a man making a reasonable request of an unreasonable woman. He had a remarkable talent for making his persistence seem like her problem. I need you to leave, Amara said again. She heard her voice starting to pull at the seams, not breaking, not yet, but thinning. If you don't leave, I'm going to call security. And say what? He tilted his head. His voice was perfectly pleasant. That your ex stopped by to check on you? That's going to sound great. She had reached for the phone before she fully decided to reach for it. Her hand was halfway across the desk when Marcus's hand came down over her wrist. Not hard. That was the thing people never understood who hadn't lived it. It was never hard. Not at first, not in public. Just firm. Just enough. Let's not make a scene, he said quietly. The lobby was very still, and then the elevator opened. Kang Jun-hae came out first, ahead of his men, which was unusual. He had an envelope in his hand that suggested he was heading somewhere specific, that he had been in motion before the doors opened. His eyes moved across the lobby the way they always did, efficient, automatic, and utterly without performance. They stopped on Marcus's hand around Amara's wrist. The second lasted longer than a second. Jun-hae placed the envelope on the small table beside the elevator bank. He did not hurry. He did not raise his voice or make any visible signal to his men, who had stopped moving in the way that trained people stop when they are waiting for instruction. He walked across the marble floor with the same quiet certainty Amara had noticed the night he arrived, and he stopped 2 feet from the desk. He looked at Marcus. "Let her go." 3 words. No raised voice. No threat explicit enough to respond to. Marcus's hand lifted from Amara's wrist. It was automatic. Amara watched it happen and understood something she had not quite understood before, that the thing Marcus had always traded in was the belief that no one would intervene, that she was alone, and aloneness was its own kind of leverage. He was good at identifying people who had no backup. He had been very good at that with her. He had miscalculated tonight. Marcus recovered quickly. He was always quick. "This is a private conversation," he said. "No," Junhei said. "It is not." He did not look at Marcus with anger. He looked at him with something considerably more unnerving, a complete absence of concern. Like Marcus was a detail he had already assessed and found unremarkable. Marcus's jaw moved once. He was running the calculation, who this man was, what this man represented, whether there was any play here that ended in his favor. The calculation took 4 seconds. Amara counted them. Marcus straightened, adjusted his jacket, and looked at Amara with the smile that always meant, "This is not over." "I'll see you around," he said. He left through the revolving doors. The lobby exhaled. Amara became aware that her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter again, the way she had when he walked in, but this time the effort showed. Her jaw was tight. There was a sound in her ears that she recognized from bad moments, a low, insistent hum that lived somewhere behind her eyes when her nervous system decided to file everything at once. She looked at Junhei. He was not looking at her with pity. She had braced for pity, because pity was what she usually got from people who witnessed moments like this. That particular expression of discomfort that was really about the witness's own unease, dressed up as concern. He was not looking at her like a problem he had solved. He was looking at her the way you look at someone when you are deciding whether to say the true thing or the easy thing. He said nothing. He picked up the envelope from the table beside the elevator bank, turned, and pressed the call button. "Thank you," Amara said. He looked back. "He'll come back," she said. It came out before she made the choice to say it. "He always comes back." Junhei held her gaze for a moment. His face did not shift into reassurance, did not arrange itself into the expression people offered when they wanted you to feel better without doing anything about it. "I know," he said. The elevator opened. He stepped in. The doors closed. Amara stood in the Valeria Grand lobby with the pianist returning to his Coltrane piece and David at his desk pretending very hard to review something on his monitor, and she pressed her hands flat against the cool marble counter and breathed through the shaking until it stopped. It took 4 minutes. She counted those too. She had learned to count things when the rest of the world got too loud. It was a trick she'd developed somewhere in the middle years with Marcus, when she stopped being able to tell which of her reactions were proportionate and which ones he had convinced her were not. Counting gave her something to hold on to, something nobody could argue with. 4 minutes. Then she picked up the guest log, noted the time, and went back to work. What she did not know, what she could not have known standing there in the quiet lobby while the pianist worked through the middle 8, was that the camera in the upper left corner of the lobby ceiling had been recording, and that upstairs, in a suite with a view of the whole city spread below it, like a map of everything he owned and everything he owed, Kang Junhei was going to watch that footage again. Not once. He was going to watch it until he understood exactly what he had seen. 3 days passed before Amara saw Kang Junhei again. She did not go looking. That much she was clear on. She kept her station, managed the desk, processed arrivals and departures with the efficient courtesy the Valeria Grand expected of its night staff, and she did not look at the elevator bank any more than the job required. She was not the kind of woman who read meaning into things that had no meaning. A man had told another man to let go of her wrist. That was what happened. That was all it was. She told herself that approximately 11 times over 3 days, which probably meant something, but she chose not to examine it closely. Marcus did not come back that week. She knew better than to take comfort in that. His absences had never been retreats. They were always recalibrations. A pause in which he decided what approach had not worked and selected a different one. She had learned this the hard way, in year 2 of their relationship, when she had thought a 2-week silence meant it was over and had started breathing again, and then the flowers arrived, a whole armful of them delivered to her office. Her coworkers had thought it was romantic. She had stood in the break room looking at those flowers and felt the walls close in an inch. So no, she did not relax. What she did instead was watch. She paid closer attention to the street outside the hotel's main entrance when she arrived for her shift. She noted the car that had been parked across from the staff entrance 2 nights running. A gray sedan that was always empty when she looked directly at it, always seemed to have just left when she came back to check. She could not prove it was Marcus. She could not prove anything, and that was precisely the trap. He understood that better than anyone. She mentioned it to David on her 4th night back. David listened with the expression of a man who was genuinely trying to be helpful, but had been placed in an institutional structure that limited what helpful could look like. He was a decent person. She had assessed this early and believed it. He was also a hotel manager, which meant his primary obligation was to the smooth operation of 47 floors of high-end hospitality, and a night concierge with a complicated personal situation occupied a category that did not fit neatly into any of his protocols. "You can file an incident report for Tuesday," he said, "since it happened on property." He didn't technically do anything on property. He grabbed your wrist, firmly. She heard herself doing it, qualifying it, minimizing it, making it smaller than it was. She had been doing that for years. I mean, it wasn't Amara. David set down his pen. "You don't have to make it smaller for me to take it seriously." She looked at him. He seemed to mean it. "File the report," he said. "Let me document what I saw. That's what we can do right now." It was not nothing. She kept reminding herself of that while she filled out the form. It was not nothing. It felt like almost nothing. She was finishing the last section of the incident report when the elevator opened and 2 of Joan Hay's men came out. The tall one whose name she thought started with K, and the compact one who stood closest to the door in every formation. They crossed the lobby with the particular economy of movement she had come to recognize, went to the entrance, spoke briefly to the outside staff, and returned upstairs. The whole thing took 4 minutes. Amara looked at her form. She was not going to ask. She was not going to walk up to a Mafia boss's security detail and ask for anything, because she was not a woman who made her problems other people's projects. She had promised herself that when she left Marcus, she would not rebuild herself by attaching to someone else's strength. She would find her own. She finished the form. She slid it across the desk to David. The elevator opened again. Junhei stepped out alone. This was unusual enough that she noticed it before she decided to notice it. He was without his men, which she had never seen before, not in 3 months of watching him move through the lobby. He was in a dark shirt, no jacket, which was also different. He looked like a man who had been sitting still for a long time and was now in motion because the stillness had become intolerable. He came to the desk. She straightened. Not from deference, from the reflex of someone whose job required them to engage with guests when guests approached. "Good evening," she said, keeping her voice even. He looked at the form partially visible beneath David's hand. David moved his hand, covering it, but not quite fast enough. "How many times before Tuesday?" Junhei asked. Amara blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Before he came here, how many times has he done something like that?" It was not quite a question. The inflection was wrong for a question. It was flatter, more like a statement with a blank at the end where he expected her to fill in the number. "That's not really... I'm not asking because I intend to involve myself in your personal situation," he said. "I'm asking because there is a gray Hyundai that has been parked on Clement Street since Sunday. My man ran the plate this afternoon." The air shifted in the lobby. Not physically. The pianist was still playing, the fountain near the east entrance was still running, but something rearranged itself. "It's registered to a shell company," Junhei continued. "The shell company is 3 weeks old." Amara's mouth was dry. "Marcus wouldn't know how to... Someone is helping him." She put her hand on the counter. Not pressing down this time, just resting, because she needed the contact with something solid. Her mind was doing the thing it did when new information arrived that changed the shape of everything before it, running backward, recalculating, checking the edges of every interaction in the past week for things she might have dismissed. "Who?" she asked. "That is what I am trying to determine." He looked at her steadily. His face was not unkind, but it was not gentle either. It was simply present, which was its own category. "I need to know what resources he has access to, whether he has money behind him or someone who does, whether this is personal or something else." "Why would it be something else?" He did not answer immediately. That pause, 3 seconds, maybe 4, told her more than the answer eventually would. "You work in this hotel," he said. The weight of that settled on her slowly. She was not sure she wanted it to settle. "You think someone is watching you, and they're using Marcus to—" "I think it is possible. I am not certain." His voice remained flat. Not cold, just precise. "Which is why I'm asking you instead of assuming." She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. He did not do the thing people sometimes did when they were waiting for you to agree with them. The small forward lean, the widening of the eyes, the subtle performance of reasonable expectation. He just waited. "Marcus doesn't have money," she said. "His family does. His uncle, specifically. Dermot Vale." She said the name carefully, the way you say the name of something you would rather not acknowledge exists. "He owns 3 dry cleaning businesses that I'm pretty sure are not primarily about dry cleaning." Something moved behind Junhei's eyes, slight. She would have missed it if she had not been paying attention. "I know that name," he said. "Okay." "Dermot Vale has been trying to move product through a corridor that crosses into territory I have arrangements with, for approximately 4 months. He said it with the same tone someone would use to describe a recurring maintenance problem. "We have been conducting a negotiation." Amara stared at him. "Are you telling me that my ex-boyfriend's uncle is complicating an existing situation?" He tilted his head slightly. "Yes." She laughed. It came out wrong. Too short, too sharp, the kind of laugh that wasn't actually laughing. "So he's not just a stalker. He's a stalker with a criminal uncle who has a business conflict with you, and I'm the—" She stopped herself. "I'm in the middle of this. You were in the middle before you knew it. That is not comforting. I'm not here to comfort you." He said it without apology, but also without cruelty. "I am here because the situation involves my business and your safety simultaneously, and I thought you should know what you are actually dealing with." She processed that for a moment. The pianist shifted into something slower, a piece she half recognized. "What do you do with that information?" she asked. "About Dermot Vale." "That is a separate conversation. But you're having it with me now." He almost smiled. It wasn't quite a smile, more a slight adjustment at the corner of his mouth that suggested he had registered something unexpected. "Yes," he said, "I am." She looked down at the counter, then back up at him. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." He said it immediately, without the half-second delay that would have meant he was deciding what answer to give. "I want you to understand your situation clearly. What you do with that understanding is your decision." She held his gaze. He was not the easiest person to read, and she had become good at reading people. That was what years with Marcus had produced, an almost involuntary talent for parsing what someone was actually saying beneath the surface of what they said. She could not parse Junhei completely. There were layers she could not see through, and she had the distinct sense that this was not accidental. But he had come to the desk. He had come alone, without his men, without the architecture of authority he usually moved inside. And he had told her something true. In her experience, that was rarer than people admitted. "The gray Hyundai," she said. "Is someone watching it?" "Yes." "And if Marcus shows up again?" "Then we will have more information than we currently do." She nodded slowly. It was not a full plan. It was not even close to a full plan. But it was more than the incident report, and it was more than the gray area of trying to prove to someone who did not want to believe her that the threat was real. "Thank you," she said, for the second time. The same 2 words as the lobby 4 nights ago. This time he did not immediately turn away. "Lock your car from the inside before you pull out of the parking structure," he said, "and change your route home. Not the same direction 2 nights in a row." She blinked. "How do you know I have a car?" "You arrived Tuesday at 9:52. The bus schedule does not land here at 9:52. There is a parking structure on the next block that validates for hotel employees." He said it plainly, without the self-congratulation that usually accompanied this kind of detail noting. "It is not complicated." "No," she agreed. "It's not." He held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he went back to the elevator bank, pressed the call button, and the doors opened immediately, like the building had been waiting for him. She watched the doors close. Then she went back to work, and she changed her route home. And she locked her car from the inside before she pulled out of the parking structure. And she did not examine too carefully the fact that she had followed his instructions without once arguing about it, because that was a question about herself she was not ready to answer. The call came on Thursday at 2 a.m., between shifts, not to her work phone, to her personal cell, which had a number she had given to approximately 9 people, all of them with reasons she had verified. She did not recognize the number. She almost did not answer. Amara. Marcus's voice, smooth and completely composed, like it was 2 in the afternoon and he was returning a casual message. Don't hang up. She sat up in bed. The room was dark. She was in her apartment, the new one, the address nobody was supposed to have. How did you get this number? She said. It was not a question. I've been trying to reach out the right way. His voice shifted, warmer, more careful. The version of him that had convinced her once that she was overreacting. I think if we just talked, without all the... How did you get this number, Marcus? A pause. In the pause, she heard something she had never heard before in his silences. A faint quality of calculation, of checking something against something else. Like he was not just deciding what to say, but deciding what she was allowed to know. I care about you, he said. That hasn't changed. She ended the call. She sat in the dark for a long time with the phone in her hand. 9 people had this number. She ran through them. Her sister in Atlanta, her friend Priya, who she'd known since college, her landlord, her doctor's office, 4 coworkers from her previous job. But she'd checked in with all of them. She'd been careful. One person she'd met at the community center 6 months ago who seemed trustworthy and probably was. Probably. She called Priya at 2 a.m. without thinking about the time, which meant she was more rattled than she'd let herself acknowledge. Priya answered on the 3rd ring, groggy and immediately alert in the way that happened when you'd known someone long enough to know that a 2 a.m. call meant something real. What happened? Marcus called me. On this number. Silence. Then, okay. Are you safe? I'm home. Does he know where home is? The question landed in her chest like a stone dropped in still water, the ripples spreading out before she could stop them. I don't know, she said. And that was the worst part. She genuinely did not know, and not knowing had a particular quality of terror that knowing, even the worst knowing, did not have. Come stay with me tonight, Priya said. I'm not going to... Amara. Priya's voice was not soft. It was the voice she used when she was done negotiating. Get your bag. Come here. We can figure out the rest in the morning. She almost said no out of pride, or maybe out of the old instinct, the one Marcus had installed, that said her needs were a burden and her fear was an overreaction, and she should handle things quietly and without making a fuss. She packed a bag. She was outside in 11 minutes, in her car, doors locked, pulling out of the lot on a route she had not taken before. She did not see the gray Hyundai. She was not sure that meant it wasn't there. Friday, she went back to the Valeria Grand for her shift, and David called her into his office before she reached the desk. He had a folder. The incident report she had filed, plus 2 additional pages she had not written. He slid them across the desk to her. The first page was a printed log of external camera footage from the parking structure, timestamps showing a vehicle, plate obscured, that had circled the structure's entry ramp 5 times on Wednesday night between 10 p.m. and midnight. The second page was a note from building security, handwritten, which surprised her. It said only, "These came to us through a third party." The third party did not leave a name. She looked up at David. "I didn't ask questions," he said, "but whoever sent this went through the proper channels. They contacted our head of security directly with documentation. Everything on those pages is admissible." She put the pages down carefully. Her hands were not shaking this time. She had moved past shaking into something harder and less pleasant, a cold, focused anger that felt unfamiliar because she had spent so long being afraid that she had almost forgotten what angry felt like. "He called me at 2 in the morning, she said, "on my personal number." David's face went very still. How did he get that number? I don't know yet. Amara, this is... He stopped. He was trying, she could see it, to frame this in language that was useful rather than alarming, and the two things were not cooperating. You need a lawyer. I know. I have a name. He opened his desk drawer and produced a business card, which he placed on top of the folder. Her name is Sandra Okoye. She does restraining orders and civil harassment. She's good. Amara picked up the card. Sandra Okoye, attorney at law. The address was 3 blocks from the hotel. She looked at the business card for a moment. Then she looked at the documentation, the parking lot footage, the security note, the incident report that finally had backup, finally had something concrete attached to it. Was this Junhei? She asked. David did not answer immediately. I don't know who sent it, he said, which was technically not an answer. She put the card in her pocket. She went to her station. At 11:45, the elevator opened. Junhei's tall man, she had learned his name was Han, crossed the lobby and placed a sealed envelope on the desk in front of her. He said nothing. He went back to the elevator. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, a printout of a text message thread. The contact was saved as DV. The messages were brief, recent, and entirely unambiguous. The last one, sent 4 days ago, read, "She's at the Valeria, night shift. Make her uncomfortable enough to leave." Below the printout, in handwriting she did not recognize, "The number he called you from is registered to Dermot Vale's second dry cleaning location. You now have what you need." She read it twice. Then she folded it, put it in the envelope, and put the envelope in her bag. She sat very still at the desk for a full minute. Marcus had not come back for her because he couldn't accept it was over. He had come back because his uncle had sent him, because she was a pressure point, a way to destabilize someone Dermot Vale wanted to unsettle. She had spent 18 months believing she was running from a man who loved her badly. She had actually been running from a man who had been told to find her. The lobby hummed around her. The pianist played. The fountain ran. Amara Bennett sat behind the desk of the Valeria Grand and understood for the first time the full shape of what she had walked into, or what had walked into her, and the understanding had a quality of cold clarity that was neither comforting nor frightening. It was just true. And truth, she had learned, was always the thing you needed before you could do anything at all. She pulled out Sandra Okoye's card and sent a text. "My name is Amara Bennett. David Shin referred me. I need an appointment as soon as possible. I have documentation." The response came in 4 minutes. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll be there." Amara put her phone away and looked up just as the revolving doors opened. Marcus walked in. He was not alone this time. Marcus did not walk like a man who expected to be stopped. That was the first thing Amara registered. The gait, the ease of it, the way his shoulders sat back and his chin stayed level. The second thing she registered was the man beside him. Taller than Marcus by 3 inches, older, wearing a gray suit that fit the way expensive things fit when they have been tailored specifically for the body inside them. The man had Marcus's eyes, the same shape, the same quality of assessment beneath the surface of the expression, but older and without the charm Marcus used to soften his edges. Dermot Vale in person looked exactly like what he was. A man who had spent 30 years making problems disappear by making the people who caused them disappear first. Marcus glanced at Amara with a look that was almost apologetic. Almost. Then he looked away, which told her everything about which direction the power in that pairing actually ran. Dermot reached the desk and placed both hands on it, flat-palmed. The same gesture Marcus used, the family inheritance of performing reasonableness. "Ms. Bennett," he said. His voice was even, measured, the voice of a man who had conducted this category of conversation many times. "I apologize for the late hour. I was hoping we might speak privately." "This is my workplace," Amara said. Her voice was steady. She was furious at herself that her voice was steady, because steadiness required effort, and the effort was a resource she was spending on him. "Whatever you want to say, you can say it here." Dermot looked around the lobby. The pianist, the fountain, David at his desk, now visibly not looking at them, which meant he was very much looking at them. "I understand you've been in contact with a mutual acquaintance regarding some documentation." The envelope in her bag. Her hands wanted to move toward it. She kept them on the desk. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "I think you do." He said it pleasantly. No threat in the voice. That was the craft of it, the long-practiced removal of anything that could be quoted back later. "I think someone has been providing you with materials that were obtained without consent, and I think before you do anything with those materials, it would be worth having a conversation about context." "Context," she repeated. "Amara." Marcus spoke for the first time, and she heard it. The note she had been trained to hear, the one that sat just below the surface of his reasonable voice and said, "Cooperate." Just hear him out. She looked at Marcus. He had brought his uncle to her workplace at midnight. He had stood there while Dermot Vale placed his hands on her desk and called documented evidence of harassment a question of context. He looked, in this moment, genuinely uncomfortable, not with what was happening, but with having to watch her face while it happened, as if her discomfort was an inconvenience to his. Something went very quiet inside her. Not calm. The opposite of calm. The kind of stillness that exists on the other side of too much noise. You need to leave, she said. Both of you. Right now. Dermot tilted his head. The pleasantness did not leave his face, which was worse than if it had. I'd encourage you to think carefully about... The elevator opened. Han stepped out, followed by two men Amara had not seen before, and then Junhei. He was in a jacket this time, which suggested he had not come from the suite. He had come from outside, or from somewhere else in the building where he had been when someone told him what the lobby cameras were showing. He did not cross the floor quickly. He walked the same way he always walked, and the lobby did the same thing it always did when he moved through it. Not silence exactly, but a redistribution of attention. Dermot Vale turned. His hands came off the desk. For the first time since entering the lobby, his face moved into an expression that was not pleasantness. The two men looked at each other across 12 feet of marble flooring, and Amara understood she was watching something that had a history she was not fully in possession of. The way Dermot's jaw tightened, the way Junhei stopped at exactly the right distance, close enough to be present, far enough to indicate he was not scrambling. Mr. Kong, Dermot said. Mr. Vale. Junhei's voice was perfectly level. This is a hotel, not a meeting room. I was having a conversation with an employee. You were finished. Dermot looked at him for a long 3 seconds. Then he looked at Marcus, a brief look, the kind that communicated an entire instruction, and Marcus straightened and adjusted his jacket and did not look at Amara. We'll be in touch, Dermot said. To Amara, not to Junhei. They left through the revolving doors. Marcus did not look back. The lobby released a breath it had been holding. Amara put both hands on the desk and pressed down until she could feel the edge of the marble against her palms. It was not shaking. She had moved through shaking and arrived somewhere on the other side of it that was harder and less legible. Junhei came to the desk. He looked at her face with the particular attention of someone assessing damage. How long were they here before I came down? He said. 2 minutes, maybe 3. What did he say to you? He called the documentation materials obtained without consent and suggested I consider context before using it. She said it flatly, the way you repeat something to make sure the listener understands how precisely absurd it is. Junhei's expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. A compression of something, anger maybe, or recognition, the way a person looks when they see a pattern they have seen before being used on someone new. He will escalate, Junhei said. I know. The appointment tomorrow with Sandra Okoye. Keep it. Go early. She stared at him. How do you know about that? A pause. Not long, but long enough that she clocked it. David mentioned you had a referral, he said. She looked at him for a moment, then she looked at the desk. The pianist had stopped for the night. She hadn't noticed when exactly, and the lobby was quieter than usual, the fountain the only sound. She did not push on the pause. Not tonight. Tonight she had already spent everything she had, and she needed what was left for the morning. Fine, she said. I'll go early. He nodded once. He went back to the elevator. The doors closed. She finished her shift on 6% of herself. Sandra Okoye's office smelled like strong coffee and old paper files, which Amara found deeply reassuring. She arrived at 8:45, sat in a waiting room chair, and for the first time in 4 days let herself be still without monitoring the door. Sandra was in her mid-40s, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses that she wore on top of her head until she needed them, which was constantly. She read through the documentation in the envelope without comment, her expression shifting between careful attention and something that might have been controlled anger. She set the pages down. How long has this been going on? She said. He showed up at my job 10 days ago. The harassment in general... Amara stopped. Reorganized. We ended the relationship 18 months ago. He's been in contact intermittently since then. But this is different. Different how? He has resources now. His uncle is involved. The The phone number he used belongs to his uncle's business. Sandra tapped the printout with one finger. This is good. This is actually very good. The text messages establish direction. There's a third party instructing him to harass you, which elevates this. It's not just a bitter ex, it's coordinated. She looked up. How did you get this? Amara had been thinking about the answer to that question since the night before. Someone provided it to me. Someone. Someone with access to communications I wouldn't have been able to obtain myself. Sandra studied her. She was very good at silence, the attorney kind. The kind that created space for you to fill if you chose to, without requiring you to. Is the source credible? Sandra asked. Yes. Is the source someone who would testify? No. Sandra wrote something on her notepad. Then we use it to build from, not as a primary exhibit. We corroborate everything we can through official channels, subpoena the phone records, establish a pattern through the incident reports, the parking structure footage. She set down her pen. I can file for a temporary restraining order today. Given the documentation and the direct contact at your workplace, I'm comfortable with our basis. Amara exhaled. It came out longer than she expected. He'll fight it, she said. They always fight it. That's fine. Fighting it generates more record. Sandra pulled a form from her drawer. Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't edit. Don't make it smaller. Just tell me. Amara told her. It took 45 minutes. She did not edit. She did not make it smaller. By the end of it, she was not crying. She had already cried about this particular material, alone, in hotel parking lots, in Priya's spare room, in her car at 3 a.m., and the crying was done. What was left was the shape of the story laid out in front of someone who was writing it down in a legal pad and treating each piece of it as evidence rather than complaint. That was different. That was something she had not experienced before. She left Sandra's office with a copy of the TRO filing and a court date 3 weeks out, and she stood on the sidewalk in the morning light and breathed the outside air and thought, this is not over. But it is different now. She was 3 blocks from the hotel when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it anyway because she was done letting unknown numbers sit unanswered while she imagined what they might be. Ms. Bennett, a woman's voice. Crisp, professional, with an accent she couldn't immediately place. My name is Grace Lim. I'm calling on behalf of a private client regarding a matter that involves you. Amara stopped walking. What client? I'm not able to say the name over the phone. However, my client asked me to tell you that the meeting tonight between Dermot Vale and 2 other parties has been moved to a location adjacent to the Valeria Grand. My client believes you should know that your name will come up in that meeting. The sidewalk was busy. Morning foot traffic, coffee cups, people with places to go. Amara moved to the edge near a building wall. Why is my name coming up? She said. Dermot Vale intends to use your relationship with Kong Jun-hye as leverage. A brief pause. He believes there is a relationship. There isn't. What Mr. Vale believes and what is true are separate matters, Grace Lim said, with the faint quality of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by the gap between those two things. My client wanted you to know because what Dermot Vale does with that belief may affect you directly, regardless of the reality. Amara pressed her back against the wall. A pigeon landed 3 feet from her, regarded her with one orange eye, and left. What is Vale planning to do? That I genuinely don't know. I was asked to relay the information, not the analysis. Another pause. One more thing. My client said to tell you, the appointment you kept this morning was the right decision. Keep everything. The line went dead. Amara stood on the sidewalk for a full 30 seconds. Then she started walking, faster now, back toward the hotel, her mind working through the morning's pieces and trying to fit them into a shape that held together. Grace Lim, private client. A woman's voice with a Korean accent underneath the professional composure, faint but there. Someone who knew about her appointment with Sandra Okoye, which she had arranged by text message at 11 p.m. the night before. Someone with access to communications. She walked faster. She found Han in the lobby, which was unusual for noon. Jun-hae's men did not typically appear in the common areas this early. He was standing near the east entrance with the stillness that all of them had. The particular quality of waiting that did not look like waiting. She went to him directly. I need to speak with him, she said. Han looked at her. His face was not unfriendly. It was like everything about Junhei's operation, simply careful. He is occupied. I know about the meeting tonight, the one involving Dermot Vale. She held Han's gaze. I think he'll want to know I know. Han looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he took out his phone, turned slightly away, and spoke in Korean for approximately 20 seconds. He turned back. 17th floor, he said. Conference room B. 10 minutes. She had not known there was a conference room on the 17th floor. She had worked in this building for 3 months, and she was still finding out what it contained. The 17th floor was not guest rooms. It was quiet in a different way than the lobby. Denser, private, the carpeting heavier, the lighting lower. Conference room B had a glass wall facing inward and a view of the city through the opposite window. Junhei was already there, standing at the window, when she entered. He turned when she came in. Han closed the door behind her. Grace Lim called me, Amara said, without preamble. She had decided on the walk-up that she was done with preamble. Preamble was a form of softening, and softening was a habit she was trying to break. Something passed across his face. Fast. Almost unreadable. She told me Vale is using my name at tonight's meeting, Amara continued, as leverage. Against you. She watched his face. How long have you known that he connected me to you? Junhei came away from the window. He did not sit. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not quite discomfort, but something adjacent to it. The expression of a man deciding how much truth the situation required. Since the night he came to the lobby with Marcus, he said, that was 4 days ago. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I was determining the extent of it before. You didn't tell me, she said again. Not louder, just more precisely. You gave me documentation. You sent Grace to warn me about the appointment this morning, which is also how you knew about Sandra Okoye, isn't it? Not David. Grace had already told you. She watched him. He did not deny it. You've been managing my information. I've been protecting. Do not say protecting. The words came out with an edge she had not planned for. Do not stand there and tell me you are protecting me by deciding what I got to know about my own situation. I have had someone do that to me for 3 years. I know exactly what it looks like. The room was very still. Junhei looked at her with an expression that had shifted completely from the calculation that had been there a moment ago. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, caught. You're right, he said. She had not expected that. The immediacy of it. No buffer, no qualification. I made a decision about what you needed to know based on what I thought was manageable, he continued. That was not my decision to make. She breathed through the knot in her chest. It did not entirely dissolve. What else haven't you told me? He looked at her for a moment. Then he went to the table and pulled out a chair, not for her but for himself, sitting down in the way someone sits when they have decided to stop managing an interaction and start being honest in it. Dermot Vale approached me 6 weeks before you came to work here, he said. He wanted access to a distribution corridor I control in the northwest. I refused. He began applying pressure, but indirect at first, then more direct. 3 weeks after you started your shift, one of my contacts flagged that Vale's people had been asking about staff at hotels where I have residency arrangements. He looked at the table, then back at her. They found you before Marcus found you. Marcus was the method. You were the point of contact. The city outside the window was bright and indifferent. They were never going to stop, Amara said. Her voice came out very flat. Even if Marcus had backed off, Vale would have found another angle. Yes. And you knew this when you gave me the documentation. I knew it was likely. But you gave me the documentation anyway. To the lawyer. So I could file the TRO. She worked through it aloud because she needed to hear it. Because a TRO creates a legal record. And a legal record means Vale's operation against me becomes official, documented. Harder to walk back. It also protects you, he said. I know. She looked at him. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm saying I should have known the whole picture. I should have been making informed decisions, not decisions on the information you chose to give me. He held her gaze. He did not look away from it, which she credited to him. Yes, he said, for the second time. You're right. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. The table between them was polished to a mirror finish, and she could see a distorted version of both their faces in its surface, stretched and curved. "What happens tonight?" she said. "At the meeting. Vale meets with two other parties who have territory interests adjacent to mine. He will argue that my personal entanglements make me a liability in current negotiations. He will suggest that I can be pressured through you. And can you be?" The question was direct. She had made it that way on purpose. Junhei looked at her for a long moment. His hands were flat on the table, not pressed down, just resting. She had learned to read his hands somewhat. They were still when he was certain and slightly tense when he was working through something. Right now, they were still. "That is what I have been trying to determine," he said. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her, and it landed with a weight she was not prepared for, because it meant something beyond the tactical. It meant he had been sitting with that question, not just as a strategic problem, but as something else. Something that required him to look at her and reckon with what he found. Before she could respond, Han knocked once on the glass and opened the door. "Mr. Kong." His voice was precise and unhurried, the tone he used when something required immediate attention. "David Shin is asking for Ms. Bennett at the front desk. He says it's urgent." A pause. Sandra Okoye called the hotel directly. "The TRO filing has been contested." Amara turned. "They moved fast," Han said. "Mr. Vale's attorney filed a counter-motion 40 minutes ago. Ms. Okoye says there's a problem with the documentation, specifically the text message printout." Amara felt the floor shift beneath her understanding of the last 12 hours. "What kind of a problem?" she said. Han looked at Junhei, not at her. That look, that small involuntary redirect, told her something was wrong before the words confirmed it. "The phone records subpoenaed through official channels don't match the printout," Han said. "The messages on the printout don't appear in the carrier's official records for that number." The room went completely quiet. Amara turned back to Junhei very slowly. "The documentation you gave me," she said. Her voice was careful in the way you are careful with something that might not hold weight. "The text message thread. How was it obtained?" He met her eyes and did not look away. "It was reconstructed," he said, "from partial intercepts and corroborating intelligence. The content is accurate. The metadata was..." He stopped. "The metadata was generated to make it presentable as evidence." She sat with that for 3 full seconds. "You gave me fabricated evidence," she said. "The substance is true." "You gave me fabricated evidence to take to a lawyer." She was on her feet without deciding to stand, the chair scraping back behind her. "Sandra filed a TRO based on that. Her professional license is attached to that filing. My case is attached to that filing. And now Vale's attorney has pulled the actual phone records and they don't match, which means I don't just lose the TRO. I look like I fabricated evidence against him." Junhei stood as well. "Amara, he's going to use this." She heard her voice changing, not louder, harder, the way metal changes under sustained pressure. "Dermot Vale is going to take this to court, and he is going to stand there and say, 'I manufactured a harassment claim against his nephew.' And every piece of real evidence I have is now sitting next to a document that can be shown to be false. And nobody is going to look at the real pieces without looking at the false one first." She stopped, breathed. The city was still bright outside the window, entirely unconcerned. "You handed him the weapon to use against me." Junhei did not argue. He did not explain further. He stood there and took it, which was the right thing to do, and which also meant he had nothing to offer in place of what he had broken. She picked up her bag from the chair. "I need to call Sandra," she said. She walked to the door, she put her hand on the frame and stopped, not turning around. "I came to you because you gave me something real. The parking footage, the incident report, the legal referral. I thought you understood what it meant to be believed." Her voice held, barely. "I didn't need someone to win for me. I needed someone to stop making decisions about my life without me in the room." She pushed the door open. "You were worse than Marcus in one specific way. Marcus always knew he was the villain. You thought you were helping." She walked out. The elevator was waiting, doors open, like the building had been listening. She stepped in, and as the doors closed, she caught a last glimpse of the conference room through the glass wall. Junhei still standing at the table, hands no longer flat and still, but pressed knuckle down into the polished surface, staring at the door she had just walked through with the expression of a man who had run every calculation available to him and arrived for the first time at the answer that he had done this wrong. The doors closed. She had 12 floors to figure out how to save a case that had just had its foundation pulled out from under it, with an attorney whose trust she needed to keep, against a man who now had every reason to go on offense, in a hotel where she still had 6 hours left on her shift. She pulled out her phone and called Sandra Okoye. Sandra answered on the first ring. Her voice was controlled in the specific way of someone who is controlled because they cannot afford not to be. Amara, I need you to tell me everything you know about where that printout came from. Amara closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them. Everything, Sandra said again. Don't protect anyone, not yourself, not whoever gave it to you. I need the whole truth right now, or I cannot help you. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. The fountain was running. The pianist's chair was empty this time of day. Amara walked into the lobby and began to tell Sandra Okoye the whole truth. And with every sentence she spoke, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not safety, not relief, but the specific and irreplaceable sensation of a woman who has stopped waiting for someone else to manage her survival and decided, at considerable cost, to manage it herself. Sandra Okoye did not interrupt once. That was what Amara noticed, standing in the lobby of the Valeria Grand with the fountain running and nobody at the pianist's chair and the afternoon light coming through the glass entrance at an angle that made the marble floor look like something expensive was burning inside it. Sandra listened through the whole of it, the envelope, Han delivering it, Grace Lim's phone call, the conference room on the 17th floor, Junhei's face when he said the word reconstructed. And she did not make a sound until Amara stopped. Then Sandra said, "Okay." Just that. One word, flat and workmanlike, the sound of someone setting aside how they felt about a situation in order to deal with it. "I need 48 hours, Sandra said. Don't talk to Vale's people. Don't talk to Kong. Don't talk to anyone who isn't me or Priya. Can you do that?" "Yes." "The fabricated document is a problem, but it's not a fatal one because we haven't introduced it as evidence yet. It was in the filing package, but I can pull it before the hearing and refile without it. What that means is we go into the TRO hearing with less, but what we have is clean." A pause, the sound of pages turning. "The parking footage is real. The incident report is real. Your testimony is real. The 2 a.m. phone call from a number registered to Vale's business. I can subpoena those records legitimately, and they will hold." "He moved fast on the countermotion," Amara said, "which means he has good lawyers on standby." "It means he's done this before," Sandra said, "and it means he's worried. People who aren't worried don't move in 40 minutes. Another pause. "Amara, what you did in that elevator, telling me everything, that was the right call. I need you to stay that course. No more outside help. No more documents from sources I can't verify. Just us and what we can prove." "Understood. Go to work. Be normal. Document everything." The call ended. Amara stood in the lobby for a moment longer. Then she straightened her name tag. It was crooked. It was always crooked. And went to her station. David looked at her from his desk. She looked back at him with an expression she had practiced to the point of reflex. "I am fine. I am handling it. Please treat me as the professional I am." He gave her a small nod and returned to his monitor. She lasted 3 hours in that posture before the night shift began filling in around her, and the lobby shifted into its evening register. More movement, more arrivals. The pianist returning to his bench and opening with something in a minor key that suited the state of her chest precisely. At 9:40, Marcus called her work phone, not her personal cell. The hotel's front desk line, which was public, which meant he was making a point about what was public and what she could not block. She picked up. "Valeria Grand, front desk. You made a mistake today." No preamble. His voice had changed. The pleasantness was still there, but underneath it something had tightened, the way a rope tightens when you've been pulling on it from both ends, and it's finally at the limit of its give. "The lawyer, the filing, that was a mistake. This line is recorded," she said, "as a reminder." A beat. "My uncle has people who do this for a living, Amara. You have a woman with a notepad in a rental office. I'm going to hang up now. The document you filed was fraudulent. That's on record now. Whatever happens next, whatever you think is going to protect you, Just know that you handed us everything we need to make sure nobody believes a word you say." She hung up. She wrote down the time, the duration, and a verbatim summary of the call's content in the small notebook she had started keeping in her left breast pocket. Then she texted Sandra. He called the work line. 9:42 p.m. Explicit reference to the counter motion. Implicit threat. Recorded by hotel system. Sandra's response came in 2 minutes. "Perfect. Keep going." The meeting Junhei had mentioned, Vale and the two other parties, the one where her name was supposed to come up as leverage, happened that night in a private dining room at a restaurant 4 blocks from the Valeria Grand. She knew this because at 11:15 Grace Lim texted her directly. Not called. Texted from a different number than the one she'd called from that morning, with no introduction. "Meeting happened. Your name was used. He told them Kong is compromised. One of the other parties is interested in that claim." Amara stared at the text for 10 seconds. Then she forwarded it to Sandra with a note. "From the same source as this morning. I'm not acting on it, just documenting." At 11:50, Junhei came out of the elevator. She had been prepared for this. She had prepared herself all evening, assembled the posture and the tone, decided how she would handle it if he came to the desk. Professional distance. Civil. Not cold, because cold was a performance, and she did not have the energy for performance right now, just clear. He did not come to the desk. He stopped at the edge of the lobby, 12 feet from where she stood, and looked at her for a moment. His men were not with him. He was in the same jacket from earlier, which meant he had not gone back upstairs to change, which meant he had not been upstairs at all since the conference room. She met his gaze. He said nothing. She said nothing. The pianist was playing something slow. Then he walked to the seating area near the fountain. Not toward the door, not toward her. And he sat down. Just sat, in one of the low chairs with the city visible through the glass wall behind him, his elbows on his knees and his hands loose, and he looked at nothing in particular. She watched him for a moment. He looked like a man who had been making decisions for so long that the sudden absence of a decision felt like a room with no floor. She looked away. Did her job. Checked in a couple arriving from the airport, upgraded their room because they had an infant and the standard floor would be loud, processed 2 late checkouts, answered the phone twice. At 12:30, during a lull, she walked to the seating area and stood near the chair across from him. Not sitting, just near. "The meeting happened," she said quietly. "Vale told his partners you're compromised." He looked up. His eyes were tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "I know. Grace told me." "I know that too." She sat down then because standing felt adversarial, and she was too tired for adversarial. The chair was low and soft, and she wanted to close her eyes for approximately 1 year. "The fabricated document," she said. "Did you know it wouldn't hold up to official record comparison?" I was quiet for a moment. "I knew there was a risk, but you gave it to me anyway. I wanted to give you something fast and concrete, something that felt—" He stopped. "Like proof," she said. "Yes. Because you knew the real proof would take longer. Subpoenas, official records, legal process. And you didn't want to wait." He looked at her directly. "I didn't want him to have more time to operate against you while we gathered it the slow way." She breathed through that. The intention was real. The impact was a case nearly destroyed and an attorney who'd had to rebuild a filing in an afternoon. She could hold both of those things at once, the intention and the damage, without resolving them into a simple judgment. She had learned that from Sandra, actually, in the 45 minutes of the morning appointment. That complexity was not weakness, it was just accuracy. "You have a problem now," she said. "Vale told his partners you're compromised. What does that mean for your arrangements?" "It means 2 of the 3 parties at that meeting are reconsidering their positions. If they move, I lose access to the Northwest Corridor entirely." He said it with the same level tone he always used, but underneath it she heard something she hadn't heard from him before. The sound of a man describing damage he had caused himself. "I have made errors this week that I would not normally make. Because of me." He didn't answer immediately. That was its own answer. "I'm not going to apologize for existing in this situation," she said. "I'm not asking you to." "I know." She looked at the fountain. The water caught the lobby lighting and broke it into pieces. "But I need you to understand that if you make decisions about my situation without telling me, you become part of the problem. Not the same as Marcus, not the same as Vale, but the same category. It says, someone who decides for me because they think they know better. He sat with that. She could see him sitting with it, not immediately agreeing, not defending, just actually letting it land. Yes, he said, finally. Third time he had said that word to her today. Each time had meant something slightly different. So what do we actually do? She said. The hearing is in 3 weeks. Sandra is rebuilding the case without the fabricated document. Vale is moving on your business partners. Marcus is calling my work line to remind me that I'm exposed. She looked at him. What's the move that doesn't require either of us to manage the other one? He looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not warming exactly, but sharpening, the way a face sharpens when it arrives at something real after a long time in territory that wasn't. Tell me what Sandra needs, he said. Officially, legitimately. I have resources that can accelerate the official record gathering without contaminating it. That's a significant line. I know where the line is. Do you? She said it without heat, just asking. He almost smiled, almost. I have been more careful with lines than I was this week. I got urgent. He said the word like it was a diagnosis. I don't get urgent. It's a problem. She looked at him. Outside, the city was doing what cities did at 12:30 on a weeknight, settling into itself, quieting at the edges while the center kept burning. I'll talk to Sandra in the morning, she said. If there's a legitimate way to accelerate the subpoena process. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it reflexively. Priya. Amara. Someone just tried my door, like tried the handle. It's 12:40 a.m. I'm scared. The lobby fell away. Amara was on her feet before she had a complete thought. Someone just tried to get into Priya's apartment. Her voice was flat and immediate. She's the friend I stayed with Thursday night. She's the only person outside of work who I told. She stopped. Marcus knows I was there Thursday. Junhei was already standing. He turned to Han, who had materialized from somewhere in the lobby with the seamlessness she had stopped being surprised by, and spoke 3 sentences in Korean. Han had his phone out before the 3rd sentence ended. Address, Junhei said to Amara. She gave it. He relayed it, and moved toward the door. I'm going, Amara said. I know. He was already moving beside her, not ahead of her, not guiding, beside. That distinction registered somewhere in the back of her mind while the front of it was already at Priya's door. The car was outside in 90 seconds, one of Junhei's, a dark sedan that sat low and moved fast. Amara texted Priya, We're coming. Lock everything. Don't open the door for anyone. How long ago? Priya, maybe 5 minutes. I called the police already. They're sending someone. Good. That was the right call. That was a real call. Documented, official, completely legitimate and untouchable. Amara felt something fierce and clear in her chest. The drive was 8 minutes. Amara spent them texting Sandra. She knew it was past midnight. She didn't care. Sandra had said call if anything happened, and this qualified, with the compressed summary of what was happening and where. Sandra responded in 3 minutes. On it. If police respond and take a report, that's another document. Make sure Priya gives them everything. The car stopped outside Priya's building. Amara was out before it fully stopped, which she would think about later as evidence of how much the evening had recalibrated her definition of waiting. Junhei came out the other side. Han and one other man held back at the car. The building door was locked. Amara buzzed. Priya's voice came through the intercom, tight and breathless. Is it you? It's me. Buzz me in. The door clicked. They went up 3 flights. Priya was standing in her open apartment doorway with her phone in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, which under different circumstances would have been almost funny. Her face, when she saw Amara, was the face of someone whose composure had been sitting in its last reserve for 20 minutes. He was right there, Priya said, and her voice broke on the last word just the once. I heard the handle. I looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see anyone by then. They were already gone. Amara looked at the door. The handle showed fresh scratches around the lock plate. Not subtle, not accidental, tool marks. Priya. Amara's voice was steady in the way it was steady when she was using everything she had on the steadiness. The police are coming. When they get here, show them the door. Tell them everything, from the beginning, including that you're associated with me and that I have an ongoing harassment situation with a named individual. Give them Marcus's name and Dermot Vale's name. Okay. Priya lowered the knife. She looked at Junhei, who was standing slightly behind Amara and to the left, and her expression shifted into something complicated. You're the hotel guy. Yes, he said. She told me about you. Priya, Amara said. I'm just saying. Priya pulled herself together with a visible effort that looked almost physical, like she was gathering pieces of herself back in from the air. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm going to put this knife down. She put the knife down on the table inside the door. The police arrived 11 minutes later. 2 officers, young, professionally neutral. Amara stood in the hallway while they took Priya's statement and photographed the door and wrote things in their report with the careful, unhurried thoroughness of people who had learned that unhurried was faster in the end. She gave her own statement when they asked. She named Marcus Vale and Dermot Vale clearly, with the incident report number from the Valeria Grand, and she watched the older officer's face register the name Vale with a slight tightening that told her it was not an unfamiliar name in this city's official records. That was something. That was more than something. Junhei waited outside near the stairwell. He had not inserted himself into any part of the police interaction, which she credited to him. He was learning, or maybe he had always known the line, and Thursday's conference room had been an air of urgency, as he'd said. When the officers left, Amara went to the stairwell. Priya's staying with a friend tonight, she said. I arranged it while they were talking to her. Someone Marcus doesn't know. Good. The scratches on the lock, that's evidence. Official, photographed, in a police report with Vale's name attached. She looked at him. That's what we need. Not reconstructed text messages. That. I know, he said. Then tomorrow Sandra goes into the refiled TRO motion with the incident report, the parking footage, the phone call, and now a police report from tonight. All clean, all real. He looked at her. His face in the stairwell light was direct and without its usual managed quality. He looked like a man who was watching something happen that he had almost prevented by accident. He's accelerating because he's scared, Amara said. The counter motion, calling my work line tonight. He's trying to bury me under enough incidents that I can't manage all of them at once. He thinks if I'm overwhelmed, I'll stop. She felt something settle into place inside her chest, hard and clear and exactly load-bearing. He's wrong. Junhei was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? I need you to deal with Dermot Vale's business problem, separately from me. Whatever negotiation you were in with him before Marcus showed up at the hotel, finish it or end it, but don't let it keep touching my life as collateral damage. He held her gaze. That negotiation is not simple. I'm not asking for simple. I'm asking you to keep it separate. She shifted her weight. The stairwell was cold. The kind of cold that comes from concrete and poor insulation and 3 a.m. I'm also asking you to stop making decisions about what I can handle. I can handle quite a lot. I have been handling quite a lot, alone, for 18 months. Her voice did not waver. I don't need you to be careful with me. I need you to be honest with me. He looked at her in the stairwell light. That particular quality of attention he had, the kind that was not performing listening, but actually doing it. Dermot Vale is going to the other parties with a proposal tomorrow morning, he said. He's going to offer them access to the Northwest Corridor directly, cutting me out. He can't actually deliver that. The corridor involves arrangements he doesn't control, but he can make the offer convincingly enough that it creates enough doubt to pause my current deals for 30 to 60 days. He paused. 30 to 60 days is enough time for him to establish enough operational presence that removing him becomes costly. So you need to move before tomorrow morning. Yes. Then go. She said it simply. I have Sandra. I have the police report. I have Priya safe. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. Go do what you need to do. He looked at her for one more second. The stairwell hummed with the quiet machinery of the building doing its work in the middle of the night. When this is resolved, he said, on both sides, I want to have a different conversation with you. She looked at him steadily. One thing at a time. He nodded. He went down the stairs without looking back. She heard the building door open and close below. She went back to Priya's apartment and helped her pack a bag and walked her to the car that would take her to her cousin's place in the East End. And she stood on the sidewalk watching the taillights and breathing the night air until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then she took out her notebook and wrote down everything that had happened in sequence, with times, because that was what Sandra needed, and documentation was the only armor she fully trusted anymore. Her phone buzzed. Sandra. Just got off with a contact at the DA's office. Dermot Vale has 2 open civil cases and 1 sealed inquiry. They know who he is. Your case just got considerably more interesting to people with considerably more resources than us. Amara read it twice. Then she texted back. How soon can we meet? Sandra. 7 a.m. Bring the notebook. She put the phone in her pocket. She was standing alone on a quiet street at 3:20 in the morning with a cold wind coming off the bay and a court date in 3 weeks, and a mafia boss somewhere in the city trying to outmaneuver a man who had used her as a chess piece, and she was not afraid. She was something considerably more dangerous than afraid. She was prepared. She started walking. Not to her car, not yet, just walking, because her body needed to move and the movement was useful. It helped her think. It helped her organize the sequence of what had to happen tomorrow, and the day after that, and the morning of the hearing. Marcus thought she was overwhelmed. Dermot Vale thought she was a pressure point. Junhei had thought she needed managing. All 3 of them had made the same fundamental error. They had watched her survive and decided it looked like weakness. She reached the corner. The city spread out in front of her, lit and indifferent and full of the ongoing business of people living inside consequences they hadn't seen coming. She stood at the light and waited for it to change and thought about the morning and what it would require of her. And she was still thinking when her phone buzzed again. Not Sandra this time, not Priya, a number she didn't recognize. And she answered it because she was done letting unknown numbers dictate her pulse. Ms. Bennett. A man's voice. Not Vale. Older, with a deliberateness to it that suggested someone who chose words the way jewelers chose stones. My name is Charles Wren. I'm a federal investigator with the Organized Crime Division. We've been watching Dermot Vale for 14 months. A pause. We understand you've recently come into possession of documentation regarding his operations. Another pause, and in it she heard the specific quality of someone who has been patient for a very long time and has just identified the moment that patience has been building toward. We'd like to talk. The light changed. Amara stood at the corner of the intersection with the green light in front of her and Charles Wren's voice in her ear, and 14 months of federal investigation suddenly converging on the week she had decided to stop being manageable, and she understood with absolute clarity that the next words out of her mouth were going to determine the shape of everything that came after. Mr. Wren, Amara said, what time is it where you are? A pause. Not the pause of someone caught off guard. The pause of someone recalibrating for a witness who was not going to be managed. Same time as you, he said. I'm in the city. You've been watching Vale for 14 months, and you're calling me at 3:20 in the morning. His operation moved faster than we anticipated tonight. We needed to reach you before morning. She looked at the green light. It cycled to yellow, then red. She had not moved. How do you know what happened tonight? We had eyes on the building where your friend lives. We've had eyes on several locations associated with you for the past 6 days. A brief pause. We should have contacted you sooner. That's on us. 6 days. Since the night Marcus had appeared in the lobby. She filed that. What do you want from me, Mr. Wren? We want to talk about what you know, what you have, and whether you're willing to cooperate with an ongoing federal investigation into Dermot Vale's network. His voice was steady and unhurried, the voice of someone who had made this call enough times to know that rushing it was the only way to lose it. In return, we can offer protections that go considerably beyond a civil restraining order. The light changed again. Green. 7 a.m., she said. I have a meeting with my attorney at 7. You can have 30 minutes before that. Another pause. That works? Bring identification. I'm going to verify it before I say anything. Of course. She ended the call. She stood on the corner for another 10 seconds, long enough to let the information settle into its proper shape in her mind, the shape of something very large that had been moving in the dark for 14 months, and had just come into the light at the precise moment she stopped being afraid of the dark. Then she walked to her car, locked the doors from the inside, and drove home on a route she had never taken before. She slept 3 hours. Not good sleep. The shallow, vigilant kind where some part of the brain keeps one hand on the door even while the rest of it goes under. She was up at 5:40, showered, made coffee that she drank standing at her kitchen window, watching the street below go through its early morning motions. A woman walking a dog. A man in kitchen whites heading somewhere on a bicycle. The ordinary business of people who did not have federal investigators calling them in the middle of the night. She texted Sandra at 6. Something new. Coming in at 6:30 if that's okay. Bring an extra coffee. Sandra. Already here. Come. She went. Sandra's office at 6:30 in the morning looked exactly like Sandra's office at 9 in the morning, which told Amara something about Sandra's relationship with sleep and also with the idea that a crisis observed an office hours schedule. She had the coffee, 2 cups, and she listened to the account of Charles Wren's call with her reading glasses up on her head and her pen moving in her notepad and her face doing the thing it did when information was arriving faster than she could sort it, but she was refusing to show that. When Amara finished, Sandra set the pen down. Federal cooperation changes the shape of everything, she said. If their investigation is at the stage where they're reaching out to collateral witnesses, they're close. They need someone who can speak to recent direct contact with Vale's operation, meaning you. She looked at Amara over the top of her glasses. This is your decision, completely. I will tell you the upsides and the risks, and then I will follow wherever you decide to go. Tell me both. Upsides. Federal protection is not a piece of paper. It's actual human beings whose job is to make sure you don't get intimidated out of cooperating. It also takes your TRO from a civil harassment matter to supporting evidence in a federal case, which makes it considerably harder to contest. If Vale gets indicted, and if they've been watching 14 months, they're building to an indictment. Marcus's leverage disappears with him. Risks. Federal cooperation means your name is in a federal proceeding. Eventually, that becomes public record. And if the case goes sideways, if Vale's lawyers find a hole in their evidence that has nothing to do with you, you've been exposed without the outcome. Sandra looked at her steadily. Also, and I want to be clear about this, they will ask about Kang Jun-hae. The coffee was hot, and she had been holding it this whole time without drinking it. She put it down. I know. Whatever you tell them has to be true. The moment you shade anything to protect him, you've compromised your own cooperation and potentially committed a federal offense. I know, she said again. What do you know about his operation? Less than they probably think. She looked at the window. He has people. He has business arrangements in this city that involve territory and corridors. I don't know the specifics, and I never asked. He intervened in my situation, gave me resources, gave me a fabricated document that nearly destroyed my case, and told me things he should have told me sooner. She paused. He's not the person I'm trying to stop. Dermot Vale is. Those are 2 different problems that may not stay separate in a federal context. I understand that. Sandra looked at her for a long moment. Okay, she said. Let Wren in at 7. I sit in the room for the entire conversation. Anything I tell you to stop answering, you stop. Clear? Clear. Charles Wren arrived at 6:58 with a partner, a woman named Castillo, who spoke less but watched more. An identification that Amara checked against the federal database on Sandra's office computer before she sat down. Wren was 60 or close to it, gray at the temples, with the particular patience of someone who had learned that the investigation was always longer than you thought and had made peace with that fact a long time ago. He laid out what he could share, which was measured and careful, and still more than Amara had expected. 14 months of financial tracking, shell companies, including the one that owned the gray Hyundai. 3 properties connected to Vale that functioned as distribution staging areas. 2 witnesses who had already given statements and whose protection was active. We need testimony about recent direct contact, Wren said. Specifically the lobby incident, the counter-motion filing, the 2 a.m. call, and tonight. We need you to walk us through the week in detail. All of that is documented, Sandra said. Incident reports, phone records, police reports filed tonight. The documentation is clean and subpoenable. Wren nodded. His eyes moved to Amara. We're also going to need to ask about Kang Jun-hae. The room was quiet. What specifically? Amara said. His connection to Vale's territorial operations. Whether he communicated to you anything about Vale's business arrangements. Whether any resources he provided to you were connected to intelligence gathering on Vale. Wren's voice remained even. We're not building a case against Kang at this time, but his operation overlaps with Vale's, and we need to understand the full picture. Sandra put her hand on the table. My client will answer questions about her own direct experience and communications. She will not speculate about the operations of third parties. Understood. Ren looked at Amara. Did Kang Junhei ever explicitly describe his business arrangements with or against Dermot Vale? She thought about the conference room, the 17th floor. The flat, precise way he had said, Dermot Vale has been trying to move product through a corridor that crosses into territory I have arrangements with. Yes, she said. Once. She told Ren what Junhei had told her, word for word, as accurately as she could reconstruct it. She did not add interpretation. She did not add warmth or context. She told the truth in the plainest language she had, and she watched Ren write it down, and she did not look away from what it felt like to do that. It felt necessary. It also felt like something she would carry for a while. Castillo spoke for the first time. Did Kang have any direct involvement in the harassment you experienced from Marcus Vale? He involved himself in a protective capacity. She chose the words carefully. He provided security presence, a legal referral, and documentation. One piece of the documentation was fabricated. She said it without pause. I discovered that and reported it to my attorney. It was removed from our TRO filing before the hearing. Ren and Castillo exchanged a look, brief, professional, the kind that communicated without broadcasting. The fabricated document, Ren said. Do you still have it? She looked at Sandra. That document is in my possession as part of my client's case file, Sandra said. If you want it, you subpoena it through proper channels. We will, Ren said. The meeting ran 41 minutes. At the end of it, Ren slid a card across the table and told her that a protection protocol would be in place within the hour. A patrol unit on her block, a contact number staffed around the clock, and a meeting with the assistant U.S. attorney handling the Vale case scheduled for the following week. After they left, Amara sat in the quiet of Sandra's office and drank the coffee, which was cold now. You did well, Sandra said. I told them things about someone who... She stopped. Who fabricated evidence that almost destroyed your case. Who also helped me. She looked at the table. Both things are true. Yes, Sandra said. That's usually how it is. She picked up her pen. The TRO hearing is in 3 weeks. With the police report from tonight and federal cooperation on record, Vale's counter-motion is considerably weaker than it was yesterday. I want to meet Thursday to prep your testimony. Fine. Go home. Sleep. Eat something. Amara picked up her bag. At the door, she stopped. Sandra, if this goes the way Ren suggests, if there's an indictment, Marcus faces charges too? Sandra considered her answer with the deliberateness she gave to things that mattered. Depends on what they find and how much he knew. Possibly conspiracy. Possibly just a civil matter. She looked at Amara directly. Does that change anything for you? Amara thought about Marcus in the lobby. Marcus's hand on her wrist. Marcus standing behind his uncle and not looking at her. No, she said. It doesn't change what I'm doing. I just wanted to know. She went home. She ate toast because that was what she had. She slept 4 more hours, better this time, and woke to 3 texts. One from Priya saying she was safe and her cousin had made her breakfast and it was going to be okay. One from Sandra with the Thursday meeting time, and one from a number she recognized as Hans. Hans' text said only, he would like you to know the matter with the other parties has been resolved. He does not expect you to respond to this message. She read it twice. She set the phone down on the table next to the toast plate. She did not respond. The 3 weeks before the hearing were the strangest of Amara's adult life. Stranger in some ways than the years with Marcus, because at least those had a familiar shape. She had known the terrain of that particular suffering, had learned its patterns the way you learn a dangerous road. This was different. This was the sensation of a threat she could name and document and hand to other people to carry in official capacities. While she went to work and came home and changed her routes, and wrote in her notebook and met with Sandra on Thursday, and talked to the assistant U.S. attorney, whose name was Patricia Webb, and who had the manner of someone who had been underestimated her entire career and had weaponized that fact with great efficiency. Patricia Webb wanted everything. She was systematic and thorough, and she went through Amara's account of the past 3 weeks with the patience of someone building something that had to last, something that could not have cracks in it, because the people on the other side had been paid a lot of money to find cracks. Marcus did not call again. Not her work line, not her personal number. The gray Hyundai disappeared from the street outside the hotel. The federal patrol on her block was unobtrusive. A car, rotating shifts, people she would not have noticed if she hadn't been told to look. She looked anyway. Old habit. She was working on it. Junhei remained in the hotel. She saw him in the lobby twice in 3 weeks, brief crossings in the early evening before his men had fully established the cordon of managed space. He usually moved inside. The first time they made eye contact and she gave a small, civil nod, and he returned it, and they both kept moving. The second time he was at the elevator and she was at the desk, and he paused with his hand near the call button and said, across the lobby, at a perfectly conversational volume that the distance made slightly formal, "How are you?" She thought about it for a second, genuinely thought about it, ran the actual assessment. "Working on it," she said. He nodded once. The elevator opened. He went in. The pianist was playing something she finally recognized. On the second hearing of it, a Bill Evans piece, calm and structured, and with a sadness in it that was not self-pitying, just accurate. She listened to it for a moment before returning to the guest log. The TRO hearing was on a Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon in a courthouse that smelled like floor wax and old paper, which Amara found bracing in the same way Sandra's office had been. She arrived 20 minutes early with Sandra and sat in the hallway on a wooden bench and did not look at her phone because looking at her phone was a form of hiding, and she had decided she was done hiding. Marcus arrived with 2 attorneys. Dermot Vale was not present. His own legal situation had, in the preceding week, become sufficiently complicated that his attention was required in other rooms. One of his shell companies had been served. Patricia Webb had not told Amara this directly, but Sandra had sources in the courthouse ecosystem, and the information arrived the way useful information often arrived in Amara's life now, sideways, from people who thought she should know. Marcus looked different in the courthouse hallway. Smaller was the word that came to her, and she turned it over because she did not want to be unkind about it. It was not a satisfying smallness, not a vindication. He looked like a man who had been living inside the belief that he was protected and had recently received information suggesting that the protection had limits. His jaw was set and his eyes did not find hers, which was new. In every previous version of their dynamic, his eyes had always found hers. She had been his reference point even when she was trying to leave. Now he was looking at his attorney's shoes. In the hearing room, Sandra laid out the case with the precision of someone who had been building this specific structure for 3 weeks and knew exactly which piece to place first. The incident report, the parking footage, the documented calls, the police report from Priya's building, the statement from the federal investigation, carefully worded and submitted as supporting context, that established the broader pattern of coordinated harassment. Vale's attorneys contested each piece. It was competent work. They knew what they were doing, and they did not underestimate Sandra, which suggested they had researched her and found what Amara had found, a woman who was considerably more formidable than her rental office suggested. The hearing ran 2.5 hours. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with the expression of someone who had seen this particular category of case many times and felt each one with the same focused attention regardless, asked precise questions and took careful notes. Amara testified for 38 minutes. She had been terrified of this part. Not of breaking, she had moved past breaking, she thought, or at least past breaking in a way that would stop her, but of the particular exposure of it, the way testimony required you to put your experience into a room and let people examine it from all sides and argue about its dimensions. She had spent 3 years having her experience argued about by someone who had been in the room when it happened. This was different. Sandra had told her it would be different, and she had believed her and still not been prepared for how different it felt to have the court reporter typing while she described Marcus's hand on her wrist and the 2 a.m. call and the scratches on Priya's lock, with an official record being made that nobody could walk back, that nobody could call an overreaction, that existed now in a file that was not going anywhere. She did not cry. She had not planned whether to cry or not. She had simply told Sandra she would be honest, and the honest truth was that the emotion she felt on the stand was not grief or fear, but something closer to the way you feel when you have been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time, and someone finally says, "You can set that down here." She set it down. Vale's attorney cross-examined her for 20 minutes. He was good. He was looking for the fabricated document. She could feel the shape of it in his questions, circling around the evidence package, probing for the gap where it used to be. Sandra had pulled it cleanly, left no trace of it in the refiled package, and the attorney could not ask directly about what he could not prove had existed. He found no gap. He eventually stopped looking. The judge issued a 3-year restraining order at 4:17 in the afternoon. Marcus Vale was to have no contact with Amara Bennett. No direct contact, no third-party contact, no contact through family members, no presence within 300 feet of her residence, her workplace, or her attorney's office. The clerk read it into the record with the unhurried efficiency of someone accustomed to the weight of words and their administrative implementation. Amara sat very still and let it be real. Outside the courthouse afterward, Sandra shook her hand with both hands. Not a hug. Sandra was not a hugger, but the two-handed shake had its own quality of meaning. "That was well done," Sandra said. "By you, not by me." "By both of us," Amara said. Sandra almost smiled. "Call me if anything happens. Otherwise, live your life." Priya was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. She had driven in from her cousin's place, where she had been staying since the night of the door handle. When she saw Amara's face, she did not ask what the outcome was. She read it, the way long friendships allow for reading, and she opened her arms. Amara let herself be held for a moment, just a moment. Then she stepped back. "I'm buying dinner," Amara said. "You absolutely are," Priya said. They walked down the courthouse steps in the late afternoon light, and Priya talked about her cousin's terrible cooking and the neighbor's dog who had taken a liking to her and the job application she'd been putting off and needed to actually send. And Amara listened and made the right noises and felt the afternoon air on her face and thought about nothing much at all, which was a form of luxury she had almost forgotten was available to her. 2 weeks after the hearing, Patricia Webb called to tell her that Dermot Vale had been indicted on federal charges: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. 4 co-defendants. The indictment included evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign targeting a witness, the witness being Amara, which upgraded her role in the federal case from collateral to central. "You don't have to do anything differently," Patricia said. "Your testimony is already in the record. We'll need you for the trial when it comes, but that's 18 months away at minimum. In the meantime, the protection protocol stays in place." "What about Marcus?" Amara asked. "He's cooperating." Patricia's voice remained professionally neutral around the word. "In exchange for that cooperation, he's looking at a reduced charge. Misdemeanor, probably. The restraining order stands regardless." She sat with that. Marcus cooperating with the federal case meant he would say the things that needed to be said about his uncle, which was the outcome the case needed. It also meant he had chosen, when it came to it, the option that cost him the least. She was not surprised by that. She was not even angry about it exactly. She felt the way you feel when something you have long suspected is finally confirmed. Not satisfaction, just the mild relief of no longer having to wonder. "Thank you, Miss Webb," she said. "Thank you," Patricia said, and meant it in the way that official people rarely allowed themselves to mean things. 3 days after the indictment, Junhei checked out of the Valeria Grand. She knew it was coming. He had been in the hotel 9 weeks, which was longer than any guest in her time there, and the business that had brought him had presumably been concluded. The checkout was handled by the morning staff, and she heard about it when she arrived for her evening shift and found the top 2 floors accessible again and a slight change in the lobby's atmosphere. The particular recalibration of a space that has housed something significant and now does not. She went to her station. She did her job. The pianist played Coltrane, the Tuesday piece he always played on Tuesdays, and the fountain ran. At 7:15, Han came through the revolving doors. She had not expected that. The men usually moved with Junhei, not independently. Han crossed the lobby with his customary economy and placed an envelope on the desk in front of her. She looked at it. Her name on the front, handwritten, in the careful print of someone who had learned English as a second language and took the letter forms seriously. "He left this morning," Han said. "He asked me to deliver this at the start of your shift." "Thank you, Han," she said. He nodded once. He left. She did not open the envelope immediately. She finished checking in a guest who had a complicated reservation situation and required 15 minutes of patient attention. She answered the phone. She updated the log. Then, in a quiet moment, she opened it. One page, handwritten in the same careful print. I am told direct is better than managed. So, I was wrong to withhold information from you. I was wrong to make decisions about what you could handle. I have spent a long time operating on the assumption that people need to be protected from the full weight of their situations, and I applied that assumption to you without considering that you had already been carrying the full weight alone for longer than I knew. That was a failure of attention. I am better at attention than I was in that conference room, and I intend to remain better. The Northwest Corridor matter is resolved, separately from you, as you asked. If you are ever in Seoul, I would like to have that different conversation, not as the woman I helped, as Amara Bennett, who helped herself and let me watch. J.H. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in the breast pocket of her uniform next to the small notebook. The lobby hummed around her. The pianist shifted into something else, something slower, and the fountain ran, and the evening guests began to arrive in their quiet procession of luggage and exhaustion and the particular hope that a good hotel inspires in people who need, even temporarily, to be somewhere that has been arranged for their comfort. Amara Bennett stood at her station and did her job, and for the first time in a very long time, the doing of it felt like a choice. 4 months later, on a Saturday in early spring, she landed at Incheon Airport with a carry-on bag and a nervousness she had decided not to pretend she wasn't feeling. The decision to come had not been impulsive. She had thought about it for the 4 months since the letter, turning it over the way you turn something over when you are not sure whether what you feel is genuine or just the residue of an intense shared experience being mistaken for something more durable. She had talked to Priya about it twice. She had not talked to Sandra about it because Sandra was her attorney and not her therapist, and she was working on maintaining those distinctions. What she had concluded after 4 months was this: she was not afraid of him. She was not drawn to him because he was powerful, or because he had intervened, or because she was confusing gratitude with something else. She was drawn to him because in the conference room, when she had told him he was wrong, he had said yes without argument or qualification. And in her experience, that particular combination, power and accountability, offered together without performance, was so rare that encountering it had the quality of finding something she had not known she was looking for. That was worth a conversation. It was worth a flight. Seoul in early spring was cold in a way that surprised her, a dry cold that came off the river and moved through the streets with purpose. She checked into a hotel that was not the Valeria Grand, but had a similar quality of quiet competence, and she stood at the window and looked at a city she had never seen before, and felt the particular clarifying loneliness of being somewhere that held no version of your past. She texted him, "I'm here. I looked up the weather before I came. I was still underprepared." His response came in 2 minutes. "That is a common experience. Are you hungry?" She smiled at her phone. Then she looked at the city and the river beyond it and the afternoon light coming off the water, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not safety, exactly, and not happiness, exactly, but the solid, unassuming sensation of being present in her own life and finding it, on balance, worth being present in. "Yes," she typed back. "I'm very hungry." They met at a restaurant near Bukchon that he had chosen and that she would never have found without direction. Small, no sign outside, with 6 tables and food that arrived in a particular order and tasted like someone had been making it the same way for 40 years, which turned out to be almost exactly true. They sat across from each other at a wooden table, and he poured tea and she wrapped both hands around the cup, and they looked at each other in the way 2 people look at each other when they have been through something together that they are still processing and have agreed, tacitly, to take the processing slowly. "You look different," he said. "Different from what?" "From the lobby." She thought about that. The lobby. The marble floor. The name tag always crooked. The hands pressed flat against the counter. The version of herself that had been rebuilding so quietly that she had almost not noticed how much of the rebuild had actually taken. "I'm not different," she said. "I'm more finished." He looked at her with the attentiveness she had learned to read as his form of approval. "More finished," he repeated. "Still a work in progress, but the framing is up. The walls hold." The food arrived, small plates, one after another, with the unhurried pace of a place that understood eating as something that deserved time. She tried each thing without asking what it was first, which she had decided on the flight over as a principle, and she found that this was a good approach to the meal and possibly to other things. "How is your business?" she asked. Not the polite version of the question, the actual one. He understood the distinction. Stable, he said. The corridor arrangement was reestablished. Two of the three parties who wavered came back when Vale's indictment was made public. He looked at his tea. The third did not. That is a loss I will manage over time. I'm sorry, she said, for the part I played in that. You didn't play a part. You were placed in a situation. There's a difference, she said. I know, but the outcome still touched you. He looked at her. Yes, he said. It did. And the way he said it made clear that he was not talking only about the business. She put her cup down. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it the way you answered things in the conference room, not the managed version. All right. Do you do this? What you do, because you chose it or because it's what you became? It was a harder question than it sounded, and she watched him understand that. His hands were flat on the table. He was thinking about the true answer, not the available answer. Both, he said finally. I chose it at a point when my choices were limited, and I have continued choosing it at points when they were not. He looked at her. I do not think I can become something different. I think I can be more careful about what I do inside what I am. Is that enough for you? I don't know, he said. I think it might be the only honest answer I have. She nodded. She had not expected resolution. She had not come here for resolution. Resolution was for things that were finished, and this was something that had just started. And starting things, she had learned, required a willingness to hold them in uncertainty for a while without making them smaller to make them more manageable. I'm going back in 10 days, she said. Sandra is helping me with the next stage. I'm looking at paralegal certification. I want to eventually work in civil harassment law. She said it almost shyly, which surprised her. She was not usually shy about the things she wanted. I decided that in the courthouse, watching Sandra work. He looked at her for a moment. The expression on his face was not congratulation and not surprise. It was something that fit better between those things. The look of a person recognizing something they expected to see and finding themselves moved by it anyway. That makes complete sense, he said. It's going to take a while. Things that matter usually do. They ate. They talked. About soul, about the river, about a building near the restaurant that he had some connection to, that he described in the circumspect way he described most things related to his work. And she listened and asked questions about the parts that interested her and did not ask about the parts that were not hers to know. He asked about Priya, whose name he remembered, which she noted. He asked about David and the Valeria Grand and whether the pianist was still playing Coltrane on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, she said. Same piece. I've started recognizing the moment he decides to play it. There's a pause before he starts where he's making the choice, and you can see it happen. What does it look like? She thought about it. Like someone deciding the room is worth the music. He looked at her for a moment. Outside, through the small window, the street was darkening into evening and the lights of the neighborhood were coming on one at a time. Yes, he said quietly. Exactly like that. They walked after dinner along the river path, where the cold was less sharp than it had been in the afternoon, and the lights of the city were doubled in the water below. They walked with a foot of space between them, not the space of people who are strangers and not the space of people who have settled anything, but the space of people who are deciding, step by step, what the distance should be. At a point where the path widened near a low stone wall, they stopped. The river moved below them, dark and constant and unhurried in the way that water is unhurried when it has been moving for longer than anything around it. She looked at it for a while. He stood beside her and did the same. I was nobody in that lobby, she said. She said it without self-pity, factually, the way she was learning to say true things that were uncomfortable. Night shift. Trying not to be noticed. I had spent 2 years making myself smaller, and I was still in the process of remembering how to take up the right amount of space. He listened. And then Marcus walked in, and you came out of the elevator, and everything that happened after that. She stopped, organized it. I spent a long time afterward thinking that you changed things, that the intervention changed things. She looked at the river. But it wasn't that. It was the fact that I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided not to believe me. Sandra believed me. The judge believed me. Patricia Webb believed me. She paused. You believed me. But that wasn't what changed things. What changed things was that I stopped needing to convince anyone first. He was quiet for a moment. The river moved. "When did you stop?" he said. "In the elevator," she said. "After I left the conference room. When I called Sandra and told her everything." She looked at him. "I stopped protecting the person who had broken something in my case, because protecting him was protecting myself less, and I chose myself." She held his gaze. "I would make that same call again." "I know," he said. He said it without anything complicated in it. No residue of the conference room, no management of what the words cost. Just knowing. "I needed you to know that I know that," she said. He looked at the river for a moment. When he turned back to her, his face had the quality it had in the stairwell at Priya's building. Without the managed layer, just the actual face beneath it, older than it usually appeared, more tired, and more real because of both. "I made every error I made because I was in a hurry," he said. "I have not been in a hurry before. Not in my personal life." He looked at her with the directness that was his version of openness. "You were the first thing in a long time that I did not want to be patient about." She took that in. It was not a declaration. It was not a beginning in any formal sense. It was just the truth, offered across a foot of space beside a river in a city she had never been to before. "Then we're going to have to practice patience," she said. "I am aware." 10 days. 10 days, he agreed. She turned back to the river. He stayed beside her. The city moved around them in its ordinary evening rhythms, traffic, voices from across the water, a boat moving through the dark with a light on its bow. And they stood in the middle of it and were very still. Amara Bennett had left a hotel lobby in fear once. She had rebuilt herself in the spaces between shifts and parking lots and 2 a.m. phone calls and courtrooms and a stairwell at Priya's building and a conference room on the 17th floor. She had told the truth when it cost her something and chosen herself. When choosing herself meant choosing against convenience, and she had arrived, by the precise and unglamorous path that real change travels, at a river in Seoul in early spring, standing next to a man who had looked at her across a lobby and seen, correctly, that she was not someone who would stay invisible. The river moved. The lights doubled in it. The cold was the clean kind, the kind that made you aware of breathing, and she breathed it in and let it be real. She had not been rescued. She had opened the door herself and walked through it, and found that what was on the other side was not safety. Safety was a smaller thing than she had spent years believing she needed. What was on the other side was simply more room. Room to be the full size of herself. Room to make errors and own them. Room to stand in uncertainty beside something she did not yet have a name for and not require the name before she allowed herself to be present in it. That was enough. That was, it turned out, exactly enough.